folks, I'm here with Tommy Hines at the South Union Shaker Village here in Logan County, Kentucky. Tommy's the director of this place. We're really excited to be here on this beautiful spring day. Tommy, tell us a little bit about how the South Union Village fits into the kind of broader scheme of the Shakers in this country.
South Union is here because of the great religious revivals that went on in this part of Kentucky in the early part of the 19th century. Shakers were already well established up north in New England, and they sent missionaries down here, and they found converts enough in this part of the state for South Union and up around Harrodsburg for Pleasant Hill. So there were two villages here in the state, and this was the most southern of the two.
What was it about South Central Kentucky that made that an attractive spot for the Shakers to settle?
The first thing was the converts that they found, and then secondly, they found a good water source here. The land was good. The first converts were willing to give up their property, which was the beginning of the village, so everything just sort of seemed to fall into place for them.
What were the inclusive dates that the Shakers settled here, and when did they kind of meet their end?
South Union was officially organized in 1807 and had a flourishing first part of the 19th century, and then finally declined and closed in 1922.
Okay. So the Shakers are famous for several reasons. One is that they're a celibate community, which is one of the reasons, the main reason I guess, that they're not still with us in large numbers. Also for their architecture and their beautiful craftsmanship.
Mm-hmm. The Shakers believed that they were creating a perfect place to live, and they had hoped to get just those folks that were very dedicated to God to live here. And so if you do that, you sort of give up everything, including a lot of the personal things that we're so used to today. Even personal possessions were not allowed at one point here. But they found that there was just a small core, really, of dedicated members and a revolving door of other folks that came and went all the time. So, and that happened throughout the 19th century and, of course, up into the 20th century.
So inside we can see the separate sleeping quarters and also some of that magnificent architecture and some of their craftsmanship, right?
We can. The Shakers thought that any kind of daily task that they were doing, whether it was something as simple as baking a pie or constructing a building like you see in the background, that was for God. So the mindset, the thought behind their work ethic was completely different than most people. And I think that's why quality is what we see here in all the things that they did.
Let's go inside and check out some of that quality.
All right.
All right, let's do it. More Go Local is coming up.
They were celibate, but they did stay in the same quarters. However, there is an imaginary line down the middle of the hall, and the men and women were not supposed to cross that line. That's why you see two separate staircases.
Stay tuned. So Tommy, right now we're on the third floor of a 4-floor structure, which includes the basement, and we're in the center house. And I want you to tell me about how South Union is a distinctive property because it was the most southwestern Shaker village in the country.
Because it was located in Kentucky, it drew Southerners as its early converts, and they brought with them their customs and their traditions and their ways of doing things, and it translated into the way that they ate, the way that they made furniture, and the way that they built buildings. And the buildings here at South Union look more like big Southern homes than the ones you would see, for instance, in Ohio or up in the Northeast.
So how many buildings are actually on the property?
Today there are 9 of the historic structures remaining. Now in the 19th century we have documented about 225 buildings that they constructed. So what you see today is just a small portion of what was here.
What's the maximum number of people who lived here at one time that you know of?
There were about anywhere from 350 to 400 people that lived in the village, and the dwelling houses, there were 4 of them, housed anywhere from 50 to 100 people depending upon the year.
So in this central dwelling house, you have male and female sleeping quarters, I think, and also we're standing here flanked by 2 staircases, which, if I recall correctly, one staircase is for women, one for men.
That's right. It's kind of a unique setup because they were celibate, but they did stay in the same quarters. However, there is an imaginary line down the middle of the hall, and the men and women were not supposed to cross that line. That's why you see 2 separate staircases, and the women's bedrooms are on one side of the hall, and men's on the other.
The Shakers did worship together, though, and they had their meals together, right?
They did. They had a meeting room here in this house where they met very often together. They had a church across the street where they met all together, and they did dine together, but again, on separate sides of the dining room. There are 2 doors into the dining room, one for the men, one for the women, but only 1 door into the kitchen because that was designated as women's domain.
Let's go see the dining room, and I'm always a fan of seeing a kitchen.
All right.
So let's go check it out.
We'll do that.
We've got more on the way.
Shakers do have very unique methods of dining. They ate in silence down here in these rooms. They ate separate, men on one side, women on the other. However, the women did all of the cooking and all of the serving and all of the cleaning up. That was just a traditional role of the time.
You don't want to miss this. So Tommy, we're here in the ground level dining room, looking at this beautifully crafted table and these gorgeous chairs. Tell us a little bit about Shaker eating culture. There's nothing I care much more about than food.
The Shakers do have very unique methods of dining. They ate in silence down here in these rooms. They ate separate, men on one side, women on the other. However, the women did all of the cooking and all of the serving and all of the cleaning up. That was just a traditional role of the time. As far as the food itself is concerned, it was true Southern cooking, and they gained a great reputation in the region, but people that came here from the Northeast did not like what they ate here, and there are a lot of comments about food that was very distasteful to the northern palate served at South Union.
Just curious, what were those northern Shakers saying about the South Union Shakers when they came here to eat?
One of the guys that came here said that the food at South Union was about as indigestible as shingle nails. So he didn't like what he was eating at South Union.
It sounds like they don't like their butter well enough.
No.
So we're in the kitchen now, and you're telling me that the Shakers actually embrace technology, whereas some simple living communities shun it. Can you tell us something about Shaker technology as it exists in the kitchen?
This is one of the places where they were constantly getting new things. The open fireplace behind me was an old-fashioned way to cook, and when this building was finished in 1833, they quickly covered it up and put in a cast iron cook stove when it was available. So they like newer, more efficient ways to get their work done. And that translated too, in the later years, into electricity, into indoor plumbing, and a steam heating system here in the house.
You can see a clawfoot bathtub upstairs,
That's
right?
That's right.
Yeah. So when people are in here in the kitchen cooking, they obviously have to sweep up their mess. And I know that the Shakers make great brooms, and you have a really nice gift shop here at South Union. Tell folks what they can find in the gift shop.
They can find a lot of things that are made here in Kentucky, and even things that are made here on site, like the brooms, for instance. We have our own line of jams and jellies and relishes that we sell. A lot of local products like baskets, the famous Shaker oval boxes that we have available. So some really unique things that you'll find down here that you won't find other places.
So you're a living history museum, preserving the heritage of the Shakers through crafts and also story.
That's exactly right.
Tommy, look, I've been seeing this strange-looking Civil War soldier walking through here, leading a school group. He's actually a friend of mine, and we're gonna go talk with Kaylin Vernon. But thank you, sir, for your time. Tommy Hines, director, you're awesome. Thanks for showing us around.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been a great day. Stick around, folks. So part of that history was we're standing on a point where Civil War soldiers camped. Could you talk to us briefly about how the Civil War helped kind of lead to the decline of the Shaker community?
You bet.
Stick around, folks. Folks, I'm here with my brother, Kaylin Vernon. Kaylin works here at South Union, and we met a few years ago when I came by for a tour. And Kaylin and I bonded over our mutual affection for Kentucky writer Wendell Berry, the simple living lifestyle. I think we both appreciate the things that really matter, like clean air and good water and good food. And I noticed that today there was a big school group here or two. And could you talk to us a little bit about the educational function of South Union? What were y'all doing here?
Sure. Today we were doing one of our education programs called Perilous Times. It's about the Civil War and the Shakers, the relationship between the two. Our education programs are pretty important to us because it is one area that we do have an outreach for our village here, our historic site. We do have several options for that, which can be found on our website. But the Perilous Times is really hitting home right now because we're going through the 150th of the Civil War. So a lot of classrooms are actually studying the Civil War, and so they're wanting to find these programs at sites that they can come out here, spend some time with some living historians, talk about the subject. For us, it's trying to relate it to the Shakers, which we don't have a problem doing. I'm actually holding a copy of Eldris Nancy Moore's journal. Eldris Nancy lived here in the ministry shop right behind me.
Yes.
And the center window on the second floor is where she penned most of this journal here. And it's from this journal that we draw most of our information and history when talking about the Civil War with students and with the public.
So Eldris Nancy is writing about the day-to-day life of the Shakers back in that particular time period, which runs from when?
From 1861, this one covers 1861 to 1864.
Okay.
She does write more, but that's in another journal. But this one has the most information in it. Of course, Mary Julia Neal, one of the founders of South Union Shaker Village, edited this journal, and it was printed back in the 60s, sold for $5 then.
Yes.
Today you can find them online sometimes, but it's really vital information for us. Journals are so important to telling the history of what went on here.
So part of that history was we're standing on a point where Civil War soldiers camped. Could you talk to us briefly about how the Civil War helped kind of lead to the decline of the Shaker community?
You bet. You touched on everywhere you could go in this village, you could be standing where something happened right here. You could read from the pages and be in that place. You talked about the decline of the community. You have to think about the aspect. When you came here, it was like a small city, 350 people, a 6,000 working acre farm, 225 buildings, factories producing cloth, textiles, blankets, food, horses, wagons. They had it. And so when armies were foraging or moving up and down the great road here in front of us, or coming up and down the railroad, they came to a small city, and this was a great place to get that stuff. Whether they paid for it, whether they just took it, whatever, that stuff left here, and that led to decline as far as production. So we've estimated over $100,000 was lost here at South Union. They also fed about 50,000 meals here at South Union out of the Center family, the North family. There was instances where an army of 5,000 federal soldiers camped right here behind over my left shoulder, and took up every stick of fence that they had on the 6,000 acre farm, burned it as firewood to heat their coffee and cook their food, and paid them $75.
So basically, the Civil War helped lead to the decline, and it probably doesn't hurt to mention that the Shakers were a celibate community, which, if you're looking to live for a long time, then as a species, that's not a good way to go, or as a society.
Right. And a war that takes away youth. And so when young men are going off to war dying, there's very few people who are going to come to a commune. Culture's changing, survival is changing. There's not as much importance on that. So the decline does happen here.
Brother, I love you. I wish I could talk to you all day long. Thanks
for
the sheep. We'll do some shearing and
love it.
some butchering here before long. All right.
I like that.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out.
My great pleasure. Yeah.